Hi everyone, and welcome to this Digging Deeper unit on mediation. In the course this far, we've focused on negotiation processes and we've discussed ways to bring them to successful conclusions. However, negotiation does not always reach a successful conclusion. Sometimes this happens in the course of a deal-making effort when parties are trying to reach a transaction between them and are unable to. And sometimes it happens after a dispute has emerged between two partners to an existing deal. They have a falling out and are unable to renegotiate their way back to a partnership. One way or another, negotiation has fallen apart. What do you do? If you stick with the literature on negotiation, it will probably provide you with further recommendations for how to keep negotiating and how to keep trying to do it. But of course, there are other options. One option is to lump it. You could just walk and whatever the consequences are, just leave it. Another option, a very popular option, is I'll see you in court. And, each party might say this to the other and one of them might actually mean it. However, before going down any of those drastic roads, there is another option. There are many other options, but one option that is recommended both by Fisher and Urey in Getting to Yes, which we explored this week, and in other places is the use of a mediator. A mediator is a third party who's an external to the dispute. He is not one of the parties who is negotiating unsuccessfully with the other. And his role is to come in and help parties work things out between them. A mediator is a third party. In other words, he or she is not a party to this dispute, is not one of the negotiators who has been unable to work things out with one another. He or she comes into the dispute and helps parties continue their negotiation until they're either able to reach agreement between them or until they finally decide that things are not going to work out between them. In other words, a mediator plays the role to some extent of a negotiation doctor. We try and take care of negotiation on our own. If we're unsuccessful, we might call in a doctor to kind of diagnose what's going wrong and maybe help us clear up any problems that we're having. Another metaphor for this, by the way, might be that a mediation is a negotiation plumber. Okay, if there's anything stuck in the pipes, bad communication, animosity between the parties, and so on, perhaps a mediator will be able to help us, flush that out and improve things. So, whatever your favorite metaphor, that's the role of a mediator. Perhaps the most important thing to say about the role of a mediator is that a mediator cannot decide the outcome for parties. In other words, the ultimate control of what happens at the end of a mediation, have we reached agreement or not, and what is the content of that agreement, is absolutely the parties, and it is not the mediator's authority. This is what differentiates between a mediator and, say, a judge, who obviously gives the verdict, or an arbitrator who gives a decision. The mediator does not. So the mediator's role is to help parties work together, but in the end, the responsibility and the decision-making power remains in the hands of the parties. Mediation happens in a wide variety of contexts. It happens in formal contexts, such as if you go to court nowadays in many court systems, a judge or an official in the court might suggest, before you go to court, have you considered working this out through mediation? You'll encounter it in many business disputes and in many family disputes, certainly in many divorce disputes, that mediation is a kind of becoming a popular and accepted method for resolving disputes that are best talked through. In addition to these more formal types of mediation, there are all sorts of less formal types of mediation going on in the world around us, and I'm pretty sure that all of you have been a part of one of these processes at some point in your life. It could be a friend helping two other friends work things out. It could be a teacher helping two students work things out. It could be a colleague in a workplace helping either two colleagues or employees or something along those lines. Any situation where there's no formal decision-making power, but still there is a third party who's trying to help the other two work things out, that is in essence a mediation scenario. As we've said, the mediator has no decision-making authority. So what does the mediator do? I've said that the mediator helps, but how does the mediator help? Well, there's a lot of science and artistry to how to help two people go about the business of rehabilitating a somewhat broken negotiation process and being able to continue on and walking out with an agreement. We deal with that at the Werner Institute for Negotiation and Dispute Resolution, and we'll be talking about some of that in this unit, mainly by describing a process management model. In other words, what might be a step-by-step approach to managing such a mediation process, whether you're managing it in a formal setting or an informal setting. Another thing that we'll have in this unit is experiencing some experienced mediators sharing stories of situations they've been in, processes that they've mediated, and their insights from these situations. So this all as just an introduction to the topic of mediation, but one that I hope you'll find valuable. I'll see you inside.